I want you to imagine a world where, through no fault of your own, you are constantly driven further into your own personal madness because you are constantly harassed by styrofoam cutouts that live in your house. The spirit of your dead bunny speaks to you, and there is no justice, either by your own hand or that of the police, that can stop you from a task that you do not completely understand. That is the world that Jhonen Vasquez established in Johnny the Homicidal Maniac. So today we'll be loosely covering the story of Johnny the Homicidal Maniac. If you want to check out the comic yourself at some point, feel free to check it out after this video, or if you're afraid of spoilers, go ahead and stop it here and come back when you're done. I will be showing still images when I can, but some of them are very gory, and I do not want to take my chances with the YouTube censors. We open the comic with a scene of a small child walking with his stuffed bear, his parents neglecting his needs and pretty much very dismissive of him. It's not a very good home life for this kid. Then we're introduced to our protagonist, antagonist, anti-hero. I don't know, it's up for you to decide. Johnny, he breaks into this kid's house through the window, looking for Bactine, is introduced to the kid who goes by the name Squee, and his teddy bear, which is introduced with the name Shmee. He has a small conversation with the bear before accusing it of being a liar, and says that it is some sort of vile monstrosity, and proceeds to stab the stuffed bear several times before leaving and informing Squee that they are neighbors. The following day, Johnny is approached by a surveyor, and he's asking questions about the rise in crime. And as this conversation goes on, Johnny gets more and more unhinged, basically admitting that he is the killer that's been going around, and he needs the blood of the people he kills to keep the wall wet. If it dries, something bad happens. And that might sound weird, that might sound crazy, that might sound edgy, but that actually goes somewhere, believe it or not. We then get a jump to another scene where Johnny's in a taco smell. I guess that's like the in-universe Taco Bell. And somebody comments on his appearance, saying that he's a wacky one. He takes exception to this and decides to basically do what his name implies to everyone in the taco smell, and escapes with no consequences. Then we get another jump, and in between all of these jumps, there's these filler comics. There's Wobbly-Headed Bob, and there's these weird little sections that don't really play into the story all that much, so I'm going to skip over that and call that filler. We get another scene where Johnny is talking about ending it all. He's going to disconnect from the server, so to say. We're introduced to two new characters, Nail Bunny and one of the doughboys, who I'm going to call F. His full name is the F word, but I'm just not going to say it. Nail Bunny, which used to be a real bunny that Johnny owned for about a day before ending its life with a nail, very creative name, tries to convince Johnny not to do it. But the doughboy seems very interested in Johnny trying to do it. He breaks the glass on his emergency exit life airsoft pistol and is stopped by what appears to be a fetus in a jar that tells him a commercial that he likes, where the whole entire family gets diarrhea, is on TV, so he decides not to do it. Now, after hearing all that, you might be saying, what the hell are you talking about? How is this cosmic horror? Well, you got to stick with it, but three things are established here that are very interesting. Number one, Johnny was talking to an inanimate object as though it was an animate object, and that doesn't go nowhere. It goes nowhere in this comic, but is later expanded upon in another comic done by the same artist. Two, Johnny, for some reason, is able to get away with large amounts of violence and not be caught and not be searched for by the police. Then, on top of all of that, Johnny tries to take his own life, but is stopped at the last second. And this will come back. These are not just loose, weird things. It's wrapped up in a lot of nihilistic speeches by Johnny, but these facets of the story are important and do come back around. In volume 2 of the comic, we get more exposition as we see that Johnny has trapped a very Christian individual in some sort of saw trap. It's going to basically destroy him. They have a conversation going back and forth, the would-be victim in the saw trap asking that Johnny not do it, and Johnny insisting that he has to do it. The man expresses that he has no fear of death, and Johnny finds this fascinating, and the man says that his faith in God is what prevents him from being afraid. Johnny envies this and explains to the man that he needs his blood to paint the wall that we were mentioning in volume 1. See, what happens is if he doesn't paint the wall, it gets soft and goopy and something tries to push through. Kind of think like the Demogorgon from Stranger Things. Well, he doesn't want to see what's on the other side of that wall, so that's why he's doing all this craziness, is to keep that wall wet so that the thing behind it can't come through. The man's life is ended, and Johnny seems remorseful about it. At one point during this conversation, he referred to the man as currently his best friend, and he seems to almost regret his actions. After this, we jump ahead to a date with Johnny and a girl named Debbie, and after realizing that he has feelings for her when they go back to his place, he decides he wants to make this moment last forever because people are terrible, and decides he's going to do a little bit of a Jeffrey Dahmer on her. She fights back and basically keeps him from ending her life. In order to console his injured soul, he decides to go ahead and try to get a cherry freezy at a gas station, and when the cashier tells him that the machine shuts off at a certain time, he decides that he's going to just go ahead and kill the cashier. He snatches the cashier's gun, fires off a bullet, ends his life, and then he turns the gun on himself, and nothing happens. Apparently the gun only had one bullet. Ain't that something? Now, in this part, this volume 2, we get a lot of Johnny talking to inanimate objects again, like the Doughboys, which are just painted styrofoam Pillsbury Doughboys, kinda. And we get another instance of Johnny not being able to end himself. It's a very coincidental way that he's not able to disconnect from the server. It's kind of weird, isn't it? Well, we're seeing it again, so obviously that means something, right? See, it's hard to dig through this and try to find the good part of the story because so much of it is wrapped up in this very I read Edgar Allan Poe and nothing matters anymore tone, and it's like kind of hard to read at times, but there is a really good story buried in there. As we get into volume 3, we're greeted with, well, one of the Doughboys giving a bit of his own nihilistic rant. This one is Z, and he's telling Johnny that he needs to go out and do some violence because Johnny hasn't smiled in a long time. So Johnny goes out, he finds a crowded place, and he decides to do something terrible to everyone, typically involving a knife, and commenting on exactly what they did wrong in their lives to deserve this. Specifically, things they did to him, like they tripped him once or they laughed at him. Just really petty stuff. Kind of reads like someone who got bullied in high school wrote this. But we then get a little bit of a squeeze segment where he's been neglected by his parents and left alone, and a stranger finds him and takes him out to the garage because he wants to do something terrible. But Johnny shows up in time and smacks the guy over the head with a pipe, then proceeds to start dismembering the body in front of Squee, and explaining how humans are poorly made machines, and explaining his nihilistic philosophy, and then saying that it might not matter because it's all his own opinion, and he's already saying that people are messed up. And then he says that Squee has to look out tonight because it's Tuesday, and that's the night that the UFOs come out. And this sends Squee screaming into the night, Johnny also races home and has a conversation with the Doughboys about his apparent inability to end his own existence. Nail Bunny tries to get some words in here, and we see that one of the Doughboys snatches Nail Bunny's head off to try to silence him. This is the first time we're seeing them move, and it raises the question, are these real, or are these figments, or are these... what exactly are these Doughboys? Is Johnny insane, or is something weird going on here? Johnny, in an attempt to prove his pseudo-immortality, tries to shock himself in the head with a taser he recently used on somebody that we'll get to later. And he tries to do it. He survives, and the Doughboys inform him that the taser isn't charged. So they try to convince him to go put his head into a garbage disposal, and based on this frame here, I'm assuming he tried it and he survived, so what is going on here? What is happening? In Volume 4, we start with Johnny descending into what appears to be the bowels of his house, but it's almost like a non-Euclidean space, where it just goes down and the rooms are much larger than you would think be possible. So he's doing all this with Nail Bunny's head on a stick, and they're having a nihilistic back and forth about the concept of happiness, and this mostly ends with Johnny realizing that he's not happy. We jump ahead to another section where he's talking to two people he has tied to a wall, and he's got them pointed at the wall he has to paint with blood or it gets all bubbly. But he's like crestfallen. He's no longer interested. He's not happy with how his life is going. Forgets why he was there, decides to just tase the guy again, and walks away without painting the wall. We then jump to a scene with Devi and her roommate, and Devi hasn't left the house since the incident with Johnny. She's terrified. She's called the police. They can't do anything, or they don't do anything, or they forget that she called, and she feels like she's constantly being watched. She's terrified of life. Her roommate or friend tells her that she should just call Johnny and see that he's probably been locked up already. At this point, we jump over to Johnny's, where he's set up an elaborate device for a firearm to discharge in his face. Basically, it involves being called by the girl that he drove away, and if she says something, then the gun will go off. One of the Doughboys is very into this, and one of them is very against it. Johnny, at this point, rebels against the Doughboys, and when the phone rings, he picks it up. It's Devi, and the firearm, this time, discharges. He had to build a Rube Goldbergian device where he was not the cause of his own demise in order to meet his demise. What's important in this frame, though, is what we see on Devi's side of the phone call, where we can see that she heard the screams of the Doughboys when the machine went off. So that means that they are most likely real. They're not just a figment of Johnny's imagination. We get further confirmation of this in the next volume, where a man comes crawling out of one of the sub-basements of Johnny's house and frees one of the victims. But we also see that the wall is drying, and out from the wall erupts this, what can only be described as a Lovecraftian monster that just begins tearing through the house left and right. As they flee from this monster, going through multiple rooms to get up to the top floor of the house, they continue to be pursued by this and eventually run into the Doughboys, who are having an argument, one of which was trying to drive Johnny insane enough that he could harness enough power to become real, and the other one just wanted to return to their master before they are quickly consumed by the encroaching monster. The pair that are escaping continue to flee to find Johnny on the floor in his last moments with a big old hole in his head. Well, one of the guys takes this opportunity to stomp the life out of Johnny, and as a result, he is dragged into the void with this monster that, has been chasing them. It falls into this space-like void, and the woman realizes that the whole universe is disappearing, and all that's left is Johnny floating on a piece of wood in like a space-like void. And that's how we end the next volume. So, what is going on here? Well, it appears that Johnny, in some way, is related to some sort of Lovecraftian horror that lives in the wall. And this monster has sent out projections to motivate Johnny to do stuff. They're motivating him to be violent. They're motivating him to be crazier. And that all of this stuff is an extension of the power of this being that lives in his house. And the cosmic horror, the Lovecraftian angle finally starts to come into view. We finally see that Johnny's madness is precipitated by some sort of horrific creature. We see that it has sent out minions to indoctrinate or to motivate Johnny to do deeds in its name. Whatever is going on here is not 100% on Johnny. Granted, he's not okay himself, but something else is at play here. And there's something people get mistaken about a lot with Lovecraftian horror is there is always a madness angle. The reveal of the monster is not the big deal in a lot of Lovecraft stories. It's the madness, the obsession, the lengths of human depravity that people will go to please these outside forces. And that is something that Johnny the Homicidal Maniac is doing very well. Jumping to chapter 6, Johnny's in heaven right now. And obviously he probably doesn't belong here considering his actions, something that's commented on by everyone in heaven that has any authority. Johnny is told that everyone in heaven is very happy and content, and therefore they kind of just do like a nirvana sitting in cheers and doing nothing else with the rest of their eternity. But we're also told they have incredible powers. Johnny meets God and, well, he's a fat slob who just wants to sleep after creating the universe, which, I mean, if that ended up being fact when I go to meet God myself, I wouldn't be surprised. That sounds about right. Anyways, Johnny gets bored and starts using his incredible heaven powers to start doing violence and gets sent directly to hell. God never answered any of his questions. The angels never answered any of his questions, but Satan's more than happy to tell him what's going on. It turns out Johnny is something called a waste lock. Basically, there are things in the world that are so dangerous that they need to be contained, and every containment cell has a lock. Well, Johnny was the lock for whatever he was controlling, and when Johnny goes bye-bye, when he kicks the bucket, the universe basically flushes that monster into oblivion. And that was the whole point. Either Johnny had to be the lock, or he had to break and flush the thing into oblivion. But this also flushes all of reality into oblivion, at which point is sort of backed up from a backup disk, as the devil describes it. Johnny is told that he's going to be sent back because he doesn't belong to heaven or hell. He belongs to something else. Again, hinting at like greater powers at play than, even what is considered to be the Almighty. So he gets sent back to Earth and everything is more or less back to normal. The only difference is the doughboys are now skewered on his wall, and he has a new friend, something called a burger boy. It's sort of like a cutout of a hamburger mascot. The hamburger mascot has a back and forth with Johnny and tells him that he needs to give in to his urges again. And Johnny declares that he just got done being a slave and he refuses to be a slave. And the burger boy replies that everyone's a slave to something. We go ahead and jump to a conversation where Devi and Johnny finally talk, and Devi basically calls him out on all his nihilistic bullcrap and tells him that he can sit and spin, basically. Johnny visits Squee one more time, telling the little child that things are dark and that he doesn't want him to be afraid. And as he leaves, we get a flash of kind of the things that Squee sees, and we find out that Squee might be a little abnormal himself, too. We finish on this panel of Johnny writing in his diary at the top of a hill, claiming that he will get rid of all of his desire for excess. And that's how we end Johnny the Homicidal Maniac. So what is the story here? You might be wondering, what was all of that? Well, to put it as simply as possible, Johnny is some sort of being that is meant to contain a horrific, monstrous being that is outside of the realms of heaven or hell. In appearance, it is Lovecraftian. He is motivated by agents or manifestations of this god in the form of the Doughboys, his conscience being probably Nail Buddy. Now, Johnny seems to be protected from the actions that he commits, whether this be because of his status as a waste lock or because of the activities of his patron god. Whatever deity holds sway over his soul is up to interpretation. But what I do enjoy about this is that it is never quite properly answered. It is almost a perfect Lovecraftian horror in the sense that no questions are ever answered, and it focuses on the internal suffering and madness of the people who occupy the world and the person most affected by it. It sort of reminds me of pieces like The Shadow over Innsmouth or Pickman's Painting, stuff like that out of Lovecraft's repertoire. So, what do I think in the end of all of this? Well, there's a lot of weird teenage angst style rambling, very Poe-inspired, very nihilistic, that makes the reading of the comic kind of difficult. It's a little bit cringe. But the overarching story of Johnny being this individual that has to be alive to prevent the universe from basically getting flushed down the toilet is really interesting to me. And the question gets raised near the end, how many times has he been through this cycle? What is the way for him to properly contain this thing without hurting everyone around him or giving in to his own excess? I think that makes the story very interesting. Despite all of the weirdness and despite all of the angst, there is something here that is very good. But it's so hard to get through all of the goddamn angst. I mean, geez. This guy, this Jhonen character, he was on some stuff back then, I can say that. He was really into his own philosophical views, and it worked out for him in the end. It spoke to people. It was enough to get him Invader Zim, so it's a good example of something you can do with your angst. He has a very unique art style that spoke to people. If you look at it, it looks almost kind of like a Western Junji Ito with crappier line art. His style is very interesting, and it carried through into Invader Zim, where all the characters have these massive expressive heads and eyes, but their bodies are like basically stick figure bodies. He does commentary about that in this. Overall, though, it's an enjoyable story. If you got the time, you're curious about reading something that used to get sold on Hot Topic shelves for like $5 an issue, give it a look. If you like this video, please leave a like, comment, or subscribe on the channel. I'm just filling in for Dayton. Whether or not he's dead is up for debate, but I will go ahead and continue to cover weird pieces of horror media in this format. If you liked it or you have any suggestions, please put them down in the comments. If you've read it before and you liked it, leave your opinions down in the comments. What did I get right? What did I get wrong? And I'll see you in the next one. Till then, I'm signing off.